We were speaking before we started recording about what we might talk about in this conversation. And I was telling you how, I guess, every once in a while I kind of do a deep dive into the zeitgeist, through what's coming up on YouTube and social media and things like that, just to see like what people, particularly younger people, are interested in terms of, the areas that I cover here, psychology, spirituality, esotericism, that kind of thing. And what I've been noticing is that there seems to be a heck of a lot of interest in Neoplatonism, Western esotericism, the Hellenic world. And so it seems like there's a lot of younger people who are interested in those ideas. And I hear a lot of scholars talking, and they're getting a lot of views on YouTube. But I'm not sure how many people are actually taking the step into practice. And so I thought you'd be a great person to have on because I see you as someone who's really on the front lines as a scholar practitioner who's out there creating content about these topics and also leading courses and speaking at conferences and that kind of thing. So you're really on the ground, and I think you probably have a really good perspective on what's happening here. And, you know, is it some kind of new renaissance that we see happening, which I kind of have a suspicion that it might be. At least the seeds are there. Whether or not it will actually flourish into an actual renaissance is, remains to be seen.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate the vote of confidence. Uh, I would say that, I am a little critical of some of this stuff. And so, some people may agree with me, some people may disagree with me, and that's totally fine. I'm not all for everyone agreeing all the time. I think we need a diversity of opinions. But what I'm seeing is that we're effectively in an existential crisis, and we have been in one uh, since long before 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago. We have been particularly. It's been a long time coming, especially for uh, you know I would say generations kind of coming into their own right now, coming into adulthood into complete disillusionment. It's been a long time coming, right? We were a far cry, the millennials, from our parents' generation, or even the generation that preceded us. We were probably more like Gen Xers, but a far cry from the generation that spawned us for sure. And I don't want to get into generational politics because I think a lot of that is bullshit. It's like meant to foment differences and like hyper sort of highlight differences. And I'm much more about taking those differences but bringing them together instead of
Yeah.
like having them rip us apart. Uh,
Yeah, I'm a bridge guy too.
yeah,
And just for the record, I'm definitely Gen X. I was born in '74.
hmm
I turned 16 in 1990, grunge era and all of that. I really identify with Gen X kind of apathy, disillusionment. And so actually, I resonate a lot with what I'm hearing from millennials and Gen Zers who are really, right at the tail end of Western Civ.
yeah, yeah. And the thing is, like, it worked for the Gen Xers. Why? Because like their parents, for the most part, raised them in traditional households, and so they were still engaged somewhat uh, with the social contract. They checked out and stuff like that. But I think that there was still an underlying moral compass that had to do with what we might consider traditional sort of social courtesy and things of this nature. And granted, that's not necessarily true for the entirety of the generation. Nothing is true for the entirety of a population or a demographic. But what I see is that the apathy and the disillusionment that we see in millennials and really Gen Zers, they don't have the same root in sort of like a traditional childhood where it's, you hold the door for people, and you say please and thank you, and it's just these baseline things that seem completely arbitrary and completely trivial, but at the end of the day it's those little things that are holding fucking society together.
Yeah.
And Gen Zers had that. Whereas, like, I mean, Gen Xers, Gen Zers and stuff, we didn't have the same kind of upbringing, you know. A lot of us were raised by single parents who were, not in the home very often. But anyway, I'm sure somebody could pick apart my argument. It's just what I've seen from my cousins, the older, my, those people, my cousins, my some of my younger aunts and uncles, they're Gen Xers. And it's like, yes, there's an apathy and there's a disillusionment, or kind of like a cynicism is probably the best word. There's a general cynicism and distrust of authority, but at the end of the day they still have heart, whereas I see a lot of the Gen Zers kind of like they don't have that root, so it's all apathy, it's all checking out, it's an extreme of that stuff, instead of like this kind of affectation or develop this development, you know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? So now you
No,
look at
that's
this
great. There's like real nihilism as compared to Gen X, like performative nihilism, where it's like
yes,
where it's an affect, right? Yeah.
yeah,
I hear you, man.
exactly,
That's such a good
yeah.
take. Yeah.
Well, it's just something that I've observed, like being in this medial position of the millennials, where it's like, yeah, okay, my boomer parents, they were not around very often because my mom had to work, and she was a single parent, and like I hung out with my Gen X cousins and aunts and uncles, and then like I see the younger generation, and I turn to them, and I'm like, we missed a step here, like this is a radical difference that where it's like, okay, we're progressing from boomer, Gen X, millennial, and then you turn, it's like it should be the next kind of anticipated leap in the sequence, or whatever you want to look at it, step up, step down. And what it ended up being was like a fucking gulf. Like it's very, very different. They're very different. But I'm also approaching 40 now, so I might just be it might just be in like old man yells at cloud mode. But to get back to the to the question, I see us having for a long time now been in having been in an existential crisis, a crisis that scholars like John Vervaeke have labeled as a crisis of meaning, certainly. But I
Well,
think it's a
Carl Jung was calling for that in 1950s and 60s. Modern man in search of a soul.